Okay, so we're back on the roof and we're going to do some basic roofer's math for you folks. As you know, we did that home across the way last week, and the surface space for the hip roof and the lower main roof was 15.5 square. When you hear roofers talk about squares, every square is a 10-foot by 10-foot surface space. So if you do that multiplication, 10 times 10, there's 100 square feet in every square. So if we know that this hip surface and that front and backward slope is 15.5 square, it's essentially 1,550 square feet. So each board of plywood is 4 feet by 8 feet. You do that multiplication, 4 times 8 is 32. So that means for a 1,550 square foot surface space, you divide it by 32, the size of each board, and it should take roughly 48.5 boards. So 49 boards to cover that space. Now here's the problem. If the entirety of that space was squared out like this, we could use an even amount of boards. However, when you have a hip style roof, right? If you look here, this board in the center is the only full board that could be used. We have a partial piece here, a partial piece there, a partial piece here, a partial piece there, and all down the bottom. So most of these pieces, right, have been cut down from 32 square feet to a size smaller than that. And unfortunately, the part that you cut off doesn't magically fit like a puzzle somewhere else. It just becomes waste. It gets thrown into a dumpster. You can't go to a lumber yard and give them the measurements of this hip portion of the roof, right? And have them give you pieces that are cut down to fit like a puzzle. The only way to accomplish it is to buy whole boards and cut that, down to the sizes that you need. And therefore, you have a lot more than 48.5 boards that were used. We started out with 45. We needed to add 15 more boards for a total of 60. And we just went back for 7 more boards. So in total, to cover 15.5 square, it required 67 sheets of 4x8 plywood, right? And a good portion of that plywood has essentially just gone into the dumpster. It's unfortunate, but again, there is no way that you can buy these cuts prefabricated to fit the dimensions of the roof. The only thing you can do is buy full boards and cut them down. It creates a lot of waste, and that waste unfortunately just goes into the dumpster. So this again was a project where the roof, the actual shingles, were in good shape. Okay, and when we pulled the shingles off, even though they were installed 11 years ago, the boards hadn't been changed since the end of the French Revolution. And again, that means that either the homeowner and the contractor, or the homeowner, the contractor, the closing agent, and the home inspector were all complicit in covering that up so that it was an unwanted and undeserved surprise for the new homeowner. And unfortunately, that's just how things happen. A closing agent doesn't want to give bad news that prevents a home from selling. The home inspector doesn't want to go and tell the seller that in order to sell the home, they have to do thousands of dollars of carpentry. And more than likely, it was not just on the roofer. And here's why. When we changed these boards today, we didn't consider profit and overhead. It was already bad news for the homeowners. So very simply, we charged them the cost of each board, which is roughly $20, and the cost for that labor to install it, which is also roughly $20. So for every one of these boards, we charge them $40. In a usual circumstance, the contractor would bill somewhere between $75 and $150 per board. So it becomes the homeowner's nightmare, and your contractor or roofer looks at it as an opportunity to bill you more, to create more profit. The only thing it created for us today was more work. It added about 3 hours to our project. We had to do all that carpentry, and I had to schlep myself back and forth to Home Depot on 3 trips in order to get those 67 boards into my pickup. So the fact of the matter is, the entirety of that surface space now on the lower main and also on the hip roof has been changed. The homeowner is being made whole today. So now we are prepared to put on the underlayment. You can see that the entirety of the space has been dripped out. If you go to anywhere on the perimeter left, the drip edge was left out. It's now being installed. You can see that ice and water, which is Winter Guard from CertainTeed, has been installed from the eaves up to 36 inches. You can see that synthetic paper also by CertainTeed Roof Runner is being installed from 36 inches all the way up to the ridge. And again, we have a box down there of CertainTeed Ridge Vent you see sitting right next to our compressor. That's also a CertainTeed product. So you have a full integrity package from CertainTeed being installed, and you had a carpentry nightmare that we did not expect that now is, completely rectified, remedied properly. And we used every board, every one of 67 boards, except for this one that's down there. And I don't believe that we will need that board. So I said 67, it looks like 66 as all of this space is filled in. And again, the homeowners at this point are being made whole. Now, as far as what I explained to you, that's not right. The home inspector, the closing agent, the sellers of this home, and the contractor should all be held responsible. In the state of New Jersey, under roof assembly with specific attention to redecking and unnailable surfaces, it says that when you pull this roof and get rid of the shingles and underlayments down to the sheathing, if any of that sheathing is deemed unnailable, it's not an option of whether or not to change it. It must be changed. And that certainly did not happen. It was hidden, right? And because new shingles were put on top, when the people who bought this home came to look at the house, they're assuming that it has a new roof. The roof looked great, but it was leaking in several areas, and that's why. Because there was a carpentry nightmare that was hidden instead of addressed. We operate in full transparency, so this is the level of quality that you can expect on every single project that we do. We had no idea that we were going to need to change all of this lumber, but what's most important is that it's being done right and the homeowner is being made whole.